All right. Good morning. No, we're starting just a couple minutes late here this morning. Thanks to everyone for being flexible with the schedule. First off, I want to welcome everyone to our session this morning. We're going to be having a great and dynamic panel discussion around the topic of navigating sustainability compliance. My name is Eric Mon. I am the head of the Sustainability Services Advisory Group for Schneider Electric, which means I've got the pleasure of working with companies such as those joining us this morning around topics ranging from sustainability reporting, disclosure, data management, strategy, and decarbonization journey. Really excited, though, to introduce you to two of our esteemed panelists this morning, right here to my left, starting first with Kira Ferber. Kira is the VP of ESG at Universal Music Group. She brings to that role a background in legal, ESG, and compliance. She's also joined by Eric Dissler to the far left here, or my far left, who's the SVP and Global Head of Sustainability at AEG. So he's responsible for programs related to energy, carbon, water, and waste management within that. I'm going to go ahead and invite them both to tell you a little bit more, though, about their role and about their companies, just so that we can kind of orient who we're speaking with today. Kira, do you want to go ahead and get us started?
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I lead our reporting at Universal Music Group. I also do a lot of strategic work around ESG. I joined a little over a year ago when our SVP of sustainability found out that we were subject to CSRD and would need to comply within the year. So it was a very fast year for me. And now that we've done our Wave 1 compliance, we're at it again this year for our second year in a row. For those not familiar with Universal Music Group, have you heard of Taylor Swift?
Yeah.
No, but we do a lot of different things. We essentially are the parent of a number of different labels, all of which support artists all over the world, making all kinds of different music. We also own merchandising companies. We do publishing. We do not do touring. That's something that I'll hand off to you, Eric. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Kira. Eric?
Yeah. Well, hey, hello, everyone. Nice to be here. My name's Eric Dissler, and I oversee sustainability for AEG, which is Anschutz Entertainment Group. And I know we didn't plan this to be a music-specific panel, but we do have a connectivity between what Kira and I do. And we can talk a little bit about that and how we're similar and dissimilar. But for those of you that may not know who AEG is, I always have to say Anschutz Entertainment Group, because usually when I say AEG too fast, they think it's an insurance company. There is an insurance company out there, AIG. We are in sports and ticketing and music. So to carry the Taylor Swift thread through, we are a promoter, and Taylor Swift is one of the artists whose tours we promote. As you can imagine, she's a mega artist, so she has several promoters, which is uncommon. Usually you have one. So we have promoted her last international portion of her last tour. But we have several artists that we take on tour. We own and operate music festivals. We own and operate music venues. We own a couple of pro sports teams, sports venues, and we own a ticketing company, Access, which is spelled AXS, but it's actually pronounced Access. I feel like I have to share that every single time I speak. So we're really proud that we won the sole ticketing for the LA 28 Olympics coming up. So you'll be probably hearing more about our ticketing company if you haven't already.
Great. Thanks, Eric. And as we were sitting down, we were joking, it's totally unintentional and a bit odd that we've got two Erics on the same panel, spelled the same way. We started to call it an Eric sandwich, but then we realized no one ever names a sandwich after the bread. So it's the Kira sandwich panel here. Nice. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today, we're really going to be focusing on, like I said, navigating a very fast-moving and dynamic compliance world and sustainability. I don't have to belabor the point that I think the last couple of years of both geopolitical turmoil, but as well turmoil in the markets, changing priorities on what companies are focused on, what investors are focused on, what consumers and even the communities that we operate in are focused on, has led to a lot of flux in priority and challenges in navigating some of these things. Couple with that, fast changing rules and regulations, moves in deadlines, moves in reporting requirements, et cetera. It's created a situation where I think probably the top skill that I would say is a driver for success in sustainability and ESG space these days. It's really agility, maybe with a fast second place for resourcefulness. So that's what we're going to really focus on in our conversation this morning is really kind of how organizations such as these, such as yours, can stay resilient, stay agile, and stay responsive and hopefully compliant in a world that, frankly, makes that a little challenging for all of us. So maybe to kind of set the stage or put a little specificity on some of the pain points that we're talking about here, I'll just go ahead and ask our speakers, like, what's a key change that's really occurred in the last year or two that kind of puts a point around this topic of trying to stay agile in a fast-moving environment?
I can go first. I mean, when I started, it was all hands on deck. Is everybody here? Who in here is a corporate? Nobody in here is with a corporate? One person? Two people? Is everybody else? Are you vendors supporting corporates? Yes, some of you. Okay. Airport.
Okay. Yep.
Amazing. Okay. Well, I'll try not to get too jargony, but when I joined, it was all hands on deck preparing for massive amounts of sweeping European regulation. We were all kind of panic stricken about how we were going to get this done. Since then, it's been death by 1,000 cuts to that regulation. In the meantime, simultaneously, very local regulation has popped up both in and outside of the United States. And we are a truly global company. And so that pivot from, understanding this big regulatory behemoth was coming straight at us and being like, okay, but we're, well prepared, to kind of whack-a-mole, regulatory whack-a-mole has been really exciting. Yeah.
Exciting. Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably share a similar sentiment. I mean, I think we as well, we have a significant European presence, so we were preparing for CSRD as well and sort of had an early Q1 preparation to build up, brought on some consultant and some support. Eric did not ask me to plug this, but Schneider Electric was our consultant that supported us in this regard, and we've worked with Schneider actually for 18 years on data management side, which is another topic. But so I think that change in the beginning of the year with Omnibus and some of the shifting has really, I think the very fact that it happened early on in the year also, I think, just set apart. I mean, you have budgets and strategies obviously that are established Q3, maybe early Q4 of the following year, and we had such an early change. Yeah. And so there's been a lot of pivoting and shifting, and frankly, just trying to deal with maybe I think in our organization, and I think others that work in sustainability felt this, maybe you all have as well, is a tendency, I think, just to sort of to be a little bit careful about where and how we're communicating our messaging, right? So the how we talk about our work, and what we've done is really tried to focus within the work that we do at our core, which is supporting our operations and our venues with energy, waste, and water management, like getting really down to brass tacks. But the ever-changing political and cultural landscapes has made this year, I think, more challenging than most.
Yeah, for sure. I think both of you shared a lot of relatable themes that we've heard from another number of other groups that we work with. One of the points that you touched on, Eric, particularly around the timing of some of the changes for the regulatory expectations in this year, I think kind of really got folks' heads spinning a little bit in terms of, okay, now this is what I thought was my primary focus, or what I budgeted to be my primary push for this year, suddenly became a different topic. How do you take that back to your leadership teams in a way that lets them know, don't worry, there's been a big change here. I'm aware of it. I'm not caught off guard or surprised by it. We know what we're doing, but we're going to be ready. Like, how do you kind of message that in a way that gives your leadership teams confidence that we're not just making this up as we go along?
I mean, I could say, almost just saying exactly what you said. I mean, I think what I've found is, over communication. I'd rather err on over communication than under. I think in the case of being in this industry, I always talk about sustainability as, building the plane while you're flying it. And in many cases, like this year, I felt like we've been just trying to find the parts to begin the building process. And I have good access to, the person I report to is a really big supporter, and I have good access to what's called our Office of the Chairman. And so I kind of get in, I show up. Maybe more than they would desire me to, but it's sort of, honesty around what we're facing, And just being really, really honest. I mean, often I sit in front of our leaders and say, look, I don't know what's going to happen, right? I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty right now. But here are the, 3 or 4 scenarios that we're preparing for. And then I'll come back at the end of the quarter and kind of report on what else I still don't know. And then what things have been determined. And I know, underneath that, there's a lot of work and projects and strategy, but I do think, in times when there's a lot of uncertainty, being over communicative and being really, really transparent and honest about what we don't know has just really helped me be able to move other sort of projects forward.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also think kind of right-sizing the message. So especially in the regulatory space, I'm a lawyer. I love this stuff and I can get super into the weeds, and my leadership team will fall asleep before I get to, the big picture. And so determining, okay, like, what do they need to know? What am I asking them for anything, or am I just informing them because it's important for them to know from a risk perspective? And making sure that my recommendation is front and center. And if we need to build in, caveats for getting pulled one way versus another, fine. But making sure, if I come to them and cite however many data points and, well, we're not really sure if this is going to be on the menu, but it could be, I think they get decision fatigue really easily and begin to wonder, kind of how we're going to get everything done. And for whatever reason, I am very confident we're going to get it all done because every single company is in the exact same place.
Yep. Yeah, I think that idea of decision fatigue and trying to come to them with recommendations and kind of that quantified version of your current view based off what information is available today of here's the risk of non-compliance, here's the risk of inaction, et cetera. One of the things that I've been fairly surprised by, and I shouldn't, because I worked for many years in the environmental compliance space before moving into corporate sustainability, is that, especially with the fast-moving changes, particularly coming out of the California jurisdiction this year, and like starting to take action towards compliance without even really knowing for quite some time what the end output needed to look like and things, we found ourselves faced a lot of times with the question of, what if I just don't comply? What if I just decide not to comply this year? I mean, what's the fine? What's the fee? And is that going to be outweighed by the cost of compliance? Whether it be, my own internal resources, building up a team to do this ourselves, or working with third-party consultants to get us compliant. Is that a conversation that you have within your groups? And if so, kind of how do you navigate that, from a way that maintains that cost of your license to operate, at the end of the day?
Well, I mean, okay.
Go ahead.
Because we don't manufacture, we have a merchandising arm, we make merch, but other than that, we don't make a ton of stuff. And so if I were to say, like, what if we just didn't comply? It's not really, like I said, I'm a lawyer. I like to comply with things. But the lift on our side versus the risk of non-compliance, right? If we're doing a deal and we say we comply with all laws, but we knowingly don't comply, I don't love that. But I talk to my peers all the time, and they're in really hard places, and a lot of them do decide, I'm just not going to comply and with certain things. I don't know that I've talked to anyone about California per se, at least not this year, because I think the enforcement is a little wobbly.
Yep.
But I know that conversation is happening some places. Is it for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the questions that I think, sort of keeps me up at night, questions that you don't want to be asked and have to answer is, what if we just don't do it? Because the sort of the penalties, whether it's financial and otherwise, are, the quantification of those aren't terribly significant relative to the scale of our business otherwise. So, and when that question's asked, and it's always asked, and I think if, again, we're talking a little bit about some of the elements of working in this space, building the plane while you're flying, and another thing is constantly, restating and reevaluating where and how you provide value, right? So I've sort of have these value drivers or part of my initial strategy, and there's 10 or 15 of them, right? I think sustainability is a complex space, and, that question about, well, what's the risk? What are the penalties? is there a fine? Can we just pay the fine? I'm really glad I'm not asked that question. I know a lot of other sustainability leaders are asked that question, and it's a tough answer to ask because it's not a terribly large fine, and we don't even know if there will be a fine. But I think the way you answer that is like certainly risk management, as well as sort of where else you've already determined with your leaders that we've been able to provide value. So there's value to our partners, value to our consumers, right? There's a license to operate thing that is I know is really critical in our business, and there's this risk of being a sustainability leader or organization and the risk of departing from that, right? And what does that look like? And so I think in the middle of looking at SB 253 and 261 compliance and dealing with maybe a little bit of head scratching with some of the leaders, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, the next thing that I should be saying, or the next sort of position out of my mouth, should be making sure that I remind them of what the value proposition is for our function to the company. And that usually helps us make progress.
Yep.
I'd add to that too. I mean, there's the risk of non-compliance, which is sort of, something that I know we were probably both thinking about throughout the year. But recently, there's also the risk of compliance, right? So I'm thinking specifically of CSRD, and I know it was a number of attorneys general who have said, if you comply with CSRD, we'll go after you. And I don't know about the legality of that, but I do know, at some point we will be in the crosshairs of something because it's just in so many directions. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an unwelcome additional layer to this discussion that I think we can all appreciate. And it's not just the regulatory frameworks like CSRD, but I mean, even the voluntary frameworks, CDP, SBTI, et cetera, that affiliation with some of those groups can, in certain jurisdictions or certain geopolitical spaces, like you said, put you in the crosshairs. You mentioned earlier, I believe, wave one reporter under CSRD and kind of I'm sure the level of lift to get your organization prepared and ready for that initial disclosure and to bring your sustainability reporting into, ESRS alignment and all of that was not insignificant. How do you balance some of that internally? And maybe it's your department versus others, or maybe it's all kind of housed within the same pace, but how do you balance that against the operational realities of sustainability? Like, if I'm spending money doing disclosure, do I have enough money budget left over to actually do the things to reduce my footprint? Is there a calculus that takes place there?
I mean, I guess the silver lining to reductions around CS-DDD has meant that we've been able to kind of take that budget and reuse it for decarbonization work, which is like what we all really want to be doing anyways. I'm so happy to be doing the job that I do, and I love it, but not everyone on my team wants to be a compliance professional, What about you?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, we talked a little bit about timing. A lot of these changes with CSRD, changed early on in the year. So budgets and, allocation of resources were kind of set for the year. So it had been able to shift that to doing the work that we all love to do more as well. It's the decarbonization work. It's the work in our businesses. It's the work that our sustainability team is executing, day in and day out. And, I think it's certainly a conversation that I know we're grappling with, because there is some value. I know we'll talk about this a little bit too, but there is value that we can pull out of all the work we're doing to get ready to comply for 261, for example. And I know that's sort of what you have to do once you're facing a project around reporting and disclosure. You want to figure out what value can I derive out of this for our business. But it's challenging because reporting and disclosure work is not sexy work, right? And
speak for yourself.
Yeah. But we're in these industries that most of our colleagues, it's dynamic, it's energetic. In order to keep someone's attention, you have to be dynamic and energetic. We're talking about athletes and musicians and music festivals like Coachella, which we own and operate. And so I know I'm conscious of when I walk in the room, I have to be perceived as, and I have to be as valuable to these leaders as some of these other parts of the business. And I don't just want to be the reporting and disclosure guy coming in and, taking all the fun out of the room. So there's a balance there. So like, how do you, and that's about how you sort of position it and pitch it, and how ultimately the result that we can, and the value we can extract out of this work can be value to that music festival or to that sports team.
Yep. Kira, you mentioned something that I wanted to circle back to, and that's that, again, speak for yourself, right? Outside of a few sick individuals such as ourselves who really get excited about this stuff, a lot of our colleagues, didn't go into this business to become experts in regulation or experts in sustainability reporting frameworks. What sort of advice would you give to those in the audience about how their teams can stay more nimble about monitoring for some of these changes? Just before we came up on stage, we were talking about Mexico and Japan out on the horizon and Australia. And, how do you keep your team upskilled around this and with their finger on the pulse of what's happening?
Besides relying heavily on our partners at Schneider Electric, which we do, I wouldn't say it otherwise. I think our peer network is just the best resource every single time. And I've, as a lawyer and before, in a risk management role, it's just not quite the same. Sustainability people, I think, are just really open, really willing to complain together, have group therapy together, and we are each other's best resource, I think. Yeah.
Yep. Similar for you?
Yeah. I would say similar. I mean, as much as I talked about our industries and our companies being cool and sexy, like I'm definitely not cool. I mean, I'm a former accountant, right? So I'm pretending, if you all think that that's what I'm expressing up here, but I think that actually helps too. So, I've been in music and entertainment for the last 15 years. Before that, I was in finance and accounting. I was an auditor at Deloitte & Touche when I started my career. So it's funny how things kind of come full circle because we're getting back to reporting. But I think, I think having, being able to use, some of that reporting, and sort of accounting background to help with how we may work with our finance team and our general counsel, our CFO is critical to our work. So spend a lot of time with that team, explaining what we need to do, pulling value out of that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's tricky. I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to do the decarbonization work in our business. And that's where a lot of the emphasis is on our team.
We've talked a good bit, or you both touched on this idea of value creation and linking kind of preparedness, readiness, preparation towards, extracting that value for the business. What do you make of sort of whether we believe it's actually happening? I think we're all hopeful that it's happening, but what do you make of the push towards a lot of the global regulatory frameworks finally starting to harmonize around sort of common definitions, common frameworks, whether it's TCFD being rolled in IFRS, whether it's the CSDDD and CSRD, leveraging ESRS. Are we seeing the market kind of turn the corner in the right way that makes it a bit more sustainable for our teams to be able to manage this data, manage metrics and reporting in a way that, collect once, use 1,000 times sort of thing? Or are we not where you'd like to see the market be for that yet?
Personally, I don't think so. I felt like we were so close, and then things just sort of kind of severed, which is so disappointing. I think that what is happening is, as a company and as individual professionals, we are becoming better at understanding the challenges of gathering data internationally, of doing it quickly and effectively, and figuring out, where all the bodies are buried. But I don't see harmonization happening in the way that, we were promised 5 or so years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like the very nature of voluntary reporting. I think it's always, until there is, so maybe less voluntary, than there is involuntary. I think there's just going to be a lot of options out there, whether it's between, geography, whether it's certain industries. I mean, the challenge we have with a lot of reporting requirements when you look at some of the voluntary reporting sort of schemes is that there's not a lot of industry-specific guidance for our industry, right? So we're sort of following general guidance, and that doesn't quite line up with the nuances of our business. So yeah, I mean, I would answer the same. I don't think we're quite there yet. I think we rely on experts, on consultants, on the way in which we brought Schneider in to help us understand how things are moving and changing. But that sort of volatility and that uncertainty is also then hard to communicate internally when we're looking at putting together an ESG report. We want sort of all the data we're gathering to be combined into a report that we can hand it to the regulatory bodies, but that we can also prepare as our voluntary CSR ESG report. And it's just really hard to pull all that together.
And to complain for a second, I mean, the whole point of the disclosure regime in the first place was to make sure companies were actually tracking this stuff in the hopes that we could improve upon it. And if we're tracking things that, we're forced to track that aren't necessarily material or, don't necessarily harmonize with one another, it makes it that much harder to actually understand your own progress and where your levers are and how you can transform as a company rather than just disclose over and over again.
Yeah, where disclosure becomes the means to the end and the product rather than the actual progress that we're all trying to make. Never one to try and finish up a good conversation on a negative note or a cynical note. So maybe pivoting back. No, it's fine. I mean, that's the reality we all find ourselves in. But maybe pivoting back to maybe optimism or more positive advice here. What's a no regret move that you've made with your team or with your organization that, looking back now on maybe initial compliance or some efforts that you made over the last year or so that you look back and you go, it felt like a risk at the time, but I'm glad we did that and we're so much better positioned because of it.
I mean, we've really dug in and because of the regulatory pressure in part, and just organically in other part, we've really had to just engage with our stakeholders that much more. And the response has been overwhelmingly positive. It's very, very clear that our employees, our artists, our suppliers, everybody wants us to be better from a sustainability perspective. And that gives me a ton of hope and creative energy and excitement around what we as a team are working towards.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. This may sound like we've been really negative up here, but I'm actually far more optimistic about the future and what we do than pessimistic. I think there's a ton of opportunity. I think I know we're talking about reporting and disclosures, but I think the two of us could sit up here and talk about all the other places in our business where sustainability is showing up in a massive way with our artists, with our sports venues, with our festivals, and that is only increasing. We're getting pressure from fans, pressure from artists, pressure from partners and sponsors, right? We drive revenue from ticket sales and sponsorships. So we work with major brands and those brands have to report and comply. So it's just pushing us forward. So so much to be optimistic about. I think, as it relates to kind of reporting and disclosures and how we sort of find maybe value out of that, I do think, and, we've gone through the process, so we have to comply with Senate Bill 261, right? And I think many of you may have to as well. January 1st, we have to have our report submitted to the California Air Resources Board and have that report on our public website. So we're pretty close to being finished. We've worked on this project the entire year. We launched it in January with Schneider Electric's consulting business, and it's taken us almost all year. It's been a pretty thorough process. And I will say, we've done all of this work just so that we can produce the requirement of producing this final report that will be submitted, and we'll check that box essentially. But to me, that is just the sort of smallest, least valuable byproduct of a process where we've gotten a lot smarter on where future risks are going to be to our business and our sites related to climate and weather. We understand our sites better from a site analysis. We've been able to use the EcoAct tool and look at that and all the sites we have globally and how we can sort of manage better and start to work through decision making. And we're actually layering that into where we plan to make investments when it comes to emission reduction, CapEx investments. We have a lot of physical infrastructure, right? So a lot of energy. And so I think that tool has been useful. And frankly, I think stakeholder engagement is really key. And we spend a lot of time working with everyone in our business, our ops teams, our risk management teams, general counsel, CFO, et cetera. And we've been able to take the results of this consulting project over the course of the year, the sort of, deliverables along the way to these colleagues and bring them more value. Now we're seen as a sustainability department to be more valuable to these parts of the business. So, I think if more of that will come, we'll just figure out how to comply, how to hand that report in, right? But then extract a lot of value out of that process that's helpful for us in day-to-day decision making. So I'm super optimistic about the future of what we're doing.
Awesome. Well, like I said, I love ending on an optimistic tone, and more importantly, love hearing that you're actually doing something with a lot of this information that you're pulling together. Because I'm an engineer at heart, and that the action is always what's important to me. So I know that we got a little bit of a late start and we were asked to shave 5 minutes. So I want to maybe draw our structured conversation to a close here and turn it over to you all in the audience for some Q&A. We've got just right at 10 minutes left. We've got Mark back there with a microphone. If anyone in the audience has questions for our guests.
Yeah. Here we go. Hello. Very loud. My name's Kerry, Director of Facilities for the new Terminal 1 we're building at JFK. So we generate a lot of trash. We're trying to incorporate a lot of like green infrastructure as part of our design to meet some of these, new compliance requirements. But like, what would you say, based on your experience, is like the one compliance item that drives you crazy? It's impossible to meet. If you could think of one, off the top of your head.
Ooh, it's fun.
That's a good one.
The one compliance item that's impossible to meet? Oh my God.
We're gonna.
Well, we have to because we're subject to assurance. So I won't say because a standard that we can't meet.
I mean, I could say, like, I don't know about it can't meet, but it's challenging. So we're headquartered in California, and we get the pleasure of having to comply with a lot of regulations and privacy requirements and such in our state. Our team, so there's a, Senate Bill 1383, right? Which is I mean, you talked about trash, so that just got me thinking about composting, right? And so food donation and composting front of house, right? So, and I know that's not how the bill is drafted, but our application is we own and operate like massive sports arenas, right? And we've got programs where we're taking, food scraps from kitchens and composting that back of house. And we have food donation program through our concessionaires, Levy. But part of that is requiring us to capture organic material, what we call front of house, so where all the fans, congregate in the arena. And that is really, really challenging, right? Because we have to we could have a whole session on material flow and waste management, like talk about, like, we want to make the decision-making process very simple and straightforward for the fan. We don't want to have, multiple bins with all the signage. We know people just walk up at the end of the day and chuck it in whatever bin they see first, for the most part, sorting processes, back of house, all that. But that's a rule, that's a law we talk about a lot on our team. In fact, two of my team members are in this room, and one of them in particular talks about it day in and day out. Cad and Nelson back there. Nelson's our sustainability manager for Crypto.com Arena, right? So he's trying to figure out ultimately how are we going to collect, organic material front of house and do it in a way where we can sort it and pull it out and meet these requirements, because the city is coming by and checking to make sure we're doing this. So I think and maybe you have that in New York as well, but that's a requirement that is really, really hard for us to meet operationally.
As soon as you asked your question, I had a pretty strong hunch the answer. We're going to come back around waste management.
Yeah.
that tends to be a push for a lot of folks. If it were more of a voluntary question, I'd say the one I see our clients struggling with the most right now is the voluntary commitments they've made around EV adoption. And with the lack of infrastructure and support and incentives for that. So great question, though. Any other questions from the group? I've got a couple other seed questions here that I can ask if we need to. Let's see here. Maybe one question that we had submitted from our marketing team was around strategies managing multi-jurisdictional compliance with limited resources. So I think it kind of circles back to that question we answered earlier with like industry groups. But, beyond that, are there specific resources that you all really lean upon? It can be, legal digests, it could be industry websites or resources, things like that you really utilize heavily.
We do, we'll get client alerts from our outside counsel, which can be helpful, but if there are vendors in the room, I am shocked that there is no actual, with all the myriad uses of AI, I have not found a single product that's like, oh, like day to day, here's what's happening with CSRD, with CSDDD, like here's what you person need to know. I can't believe it doesn't exist. We're constantly, hearing about new regulation. I just heard about one UAE. It's a mess, and I can't believe we're not, there isn't a one-stop shop. Why not? Yeah, there should be.
Yeah, a way to manage it all. Yeah. I mean, often I send an email to Alex on the Schneider Electric team, and that's how I get my. I mean, it's like I say that like we do. It's really necessary. It's helpful to have an ecosystem of stakeholders and partners and experts. Like I know that I can't be, and our team can't be the expert on it. Sustainability is such a broad space, and the other way I like to think about it is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I mean, and I have to be sort of an inch thick and a mile wide, right? And so we rely on experts, and I'm quite convinced that I'm an expert at nothing in sustainability, right? So, but it's like, okay, how do I keep it all together? And when we need, an understanding on sort of who can peek around the corner and where are things going and what's happening in the regulatory landscapes, we go to our consultants, and Schneider is one of our consultants, and they're our consultant around sustainability, as well as data management and energy. So sort of pull a lot of value out of that relationship. That helps us tremendously. And I will say, because you talked about multi-jurisdictional, we're trying to do as much as we can from a corporate perspective. So if we can create one sort of global report, set of data perspective, and then hopefully that can apply to CSRD Europe, Australia, which is coming, Japan's coming. We're just talking about Mexico, right? So being able to kind of utilize one set of responses for all, and we have, which I would say might sound easy, but we do have people and teams in those parts of the world that frankly want to do their own reports, right? They want to create a Germany report or a UK based report. And so it's a good energy to have that they want to work with us and support it, but we're trying to pull all that back and create one global perspective. Yeah. And Schneider's actually been a great partner with us in trying to figure that out.
I do think that balance, though, of empowering your regional or local teams who may understand and have boots on the ground to understand kind of the local nuance of a regulation or a requirement better and speak for their operations, but still anchoring that back in a single source of truth, using the same numbers, using the same systems and platforms so that you don't end up with two versions of the truth out there. Great follow-up on that. Maybe with that, we've got about 2 minutes left, so maybe we'll wrap up with some key takeaways and then maybe a plug for some of our afternoon sessions as well. So again, hopefully those of you in the audience, particularly those of you representing corporates today, heard some common themes and common challenges around kind of managing this dynamic and fast-moving landscape of regulatory reporting with limited resources, competing priorities, and just a challenge of the day, it seems. But hopefully as well, you heard a little bit of optimism around some of those no regret decisions, some of the processes, the tools, as well as just the overall mindset around agility that's helped make them successful in their roles and make their organizations a lot more resilient. As we think about the rest of the day today, I know we're probably standing between a lot of you and lunch right now, so definitely want to make use of the infrastructure around food, but there will be follow-up sessions this afternoon. The first being around kind of using technology to scale innovation and setting records doing so. That's at 1 p.m., 1 to 1:45. Another session around technology, unlocking decarbonization. So specifically diving into that further, that's going to be at 2 p.m. today. And then with that, I'd just invite you all to please thank our panelists today with a round of applause. And if you have any other questions, feel free to say after.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.